In this episode of Restore It, the Mercedes W123 is finally completed and given back to its owner. So as most of you will know, this project was a bit of a risk, and it turned out to be probably one of the biggest mistakes I've ever made in my life. Super stressful at times, and all round a bit of a nightmare. But in hindsight, I've taken so many good things from this restoration. There have been countless lessons learned, new friendships made, and so much hands-on experience. It was like being thrown in at the deep end for 2 years and made to get through every issue one way or another. Although it was a huge mistake taking it on, I wouldn't change my decision if I could go back in time. I think this mistake is going to help guide me for years to come in so many different ways. And now, most importantly, I can focus on the E30 and single item restoration episodes once again, which is something I'm really excited to get back into because I won't have to constantly worry about a Mercedes that I don't own. There's only a few things left to sort out before it's ready to drive away. And yes, drive away. The owner is picking the car up and driving it 100 miles home. So no pressure. So here's what's left. The windscreens need installing, the front left fender needs replacing with this one once it's painted, the car still needs to be started and tested once I find out why it doesn't start, the side windows need to be adjusted now that all of the rubber and trims are in, and as you're about to see, a few other things need installing, starting with the gearbox earth cable. With that done, I can move on to the engine bay to make sure all of the wiring is back where it came from and held in place with the proper cable ties. One thing I need to be careful with in the future when I do take on another car is to make note of any bodge jobs that have taken place before I remove anything. It took me literally hours to work out that 2 different types of hoses joined together with a jerry clip for the oil pressure gauge. I had to get some new hose for the washer jets, and thankfully the stuff I bought is a seriously good fit. I'm making sure to clip the engine loom into place at every given opportunity on its path around the engine bay. I've got to say this is the most satisfying part of the restoration, putting everything back where it came from, all nice and clean and rust free. With most of the engine loom hooked up in various spots, I thought I'd try cranking it over to see if there were any signs of life. Well, none whatsoever. Something isn't right. More tinkering is definitely required. Whilst I'm connecting the last of the loom up, the new genuine front left fender is being prepped and painted by Bobby at Vehicle Paintwork Specialists. So really I should get this old one off. So before I start stripping this quarter panel, I want to quickly tell you about eManual Online. These are factory style workshop repair manuals for the BMW E30. This is exactly what technicians use at dealerships when they need to carry out work on customers' cars. Step-by-step instructions with pictures and talk specs covering everything you need to know about a particular vehicle. And they'll also tell you if you need special tools or equipment. These manuals will show you how to do practically any job you can think of. And better still, you can get a manual for almost any car in existence. I've put a link down in the description if you want to check it out. These things are usually only $20, but I'm going to leave a discount code down there for 30% off your entire order. You can download all of your manuals to any computer and have it for the rest of your wrenching life. They hold invaluable information that can save you a ton of money and give you the knowledge and confidence to do jobs like this at home. Big thanks to eManual Online for sponsoring this episode and helping people like you and me to better understand our cars. Let's get back to the Mercedes. Annoyingly, the bumper and some of the trim have to be removed before I can get the fender off. With all of the bolts and self-tapping screws off, I can carefully lift the panel away from the car and straight into the bin. I never did complain to the company who sold me this panel, whoever they are, I just cannot be bothered. So with that off, I can now more easily attach the vacuum tank that sits underneath. I was planning on doing this with the panel on, but I'm glad I didn't. I haven't filmed absolutely everything because the faffery is real, but here's a look at the engine bay now that it's been organised. To find out exactly where everything goes, I used a photo I took of the engine bay before the series began, and I've got to say, after 2 years I really wouldn't have been able to do it without that photo. One thing I didn't catch in detail was the coil pack and the surrounding wires, the most important area for ignition. This is probably why the car seems completely dead. With pretty much everything in place, the only thing left was the air intake. It was only at this point that I realised the lid was quite rusty and needed a quick derust and paint to match the rest of the engine bay. Before I forget, The engine also needs oil and coolant if I'm going to attempt to start it. And finally some fresh petrol as the tank was drained right at the start of the restoration. So with all of that done and some more tinkering of the wires, I gave it another go. It's cranking, but it's still a no-go. By this point I was really stuck and annoyed at myself for not taking a detailed photo of the coil pack area. So of course the man I called was Mark Kosovich at W123 World. I asked him to look at the coil wiring on one of the 25 odd examples he had in his workshop to see where each wire goes, and thankfully he had a 280 CE coupe in, just like the one I'm working on. After a bit of back and forth, I matched the setup he had in front of him with the one in front of me and gave it another go. Not a bad start for an engine that's been sat on a pallet for 2 years. I just want to give a big thanks to Mark and everyone at W123 World for all of the help, and if you want to see more W123 content, Mark has just started the W123 official YouTube channel, which I'll leave a link to down below. I can already tell this is going to be a great channel to follow. Now just to make it sound less like a tractor by adding the exhaust. It was only at this point that I realised that adding it in this state would ruin all of the work I had done on the underside of the car. This wasn't agreed in the original contract or in any updated version, but I knew I had to blast as much of the rust off as possible and recoat it with some fresh high temp exhaust paint to accommodate the customer's high expectations, and to be honest with you, I couldn't sleep at night knowing it was back on the car, covered in thick rust. With most of the rust gone, I could then add 3 coats of black VHT high temp paint to the entire thing. Once it was dry to the touch, Scott and I could then lift it into place and get it bolted in. The real drying process will happen when the car's up to temperature. Something that just went missing, amongst other things, was this very specifically designed throttle pedal securing clip. I had to get a new one from Mercedes and thankfully they had one in stock and it was only £1.60. Very cheap and quick to install, but so important for being able to drive the car. Without this, the throttle pedal just slides off its mount. Moving on to something just as important, the windscreens. This is something I don't trust myself to do. I've cleaned the rubbers inside and out and polished the glass, but I don't want to risk breaking one of these. I checked at the windscreen place and there are only 3 front screens available and 0 rears. So instead of breaking both of them after trying for 7 hours, I took the car to C&D Windscreens to have them professionally fitted. I didn't want to film the guys at work, but C&D specialise in windscreen installs for cars of any age, even this 40-year-old Mercedes. These guys also have a general workshop side that can do MOTs and repairs. I would just like to say thank you to C&D for helping me get this restoration done within the customer's deadline. They squeezed me in one afternoon and did a brilliant job. Even with my 4 welds underneath, one in each bottom corner, it looks like the windscreens have never been out. I was really happy to get these in, as I was quite stressed about my welds causing an issue during the install, as it's the first time I've done a repair like this, but they assured me everything was absolutely fine, and the results speak for themselves. So with that done, I put the car back on my lift so I could add some fresh oil into the differential. Ignore the sudden workshop change and complete mess you might see in the background. I'll have an episode out on that as soon as possible. So these are the only parts left to go onto the car before it's fully rebuilt, including the newly painted OEM wing. Big thanks again to Bobby and Tony at Vehicle Paintwork Specialists for getting this done just in the nick of time. These guys don't mess around and they do a fantastic job every single time. So first things first, this fender needs to go on so everything else can attach to it. If you compare this door gap to the one with the pattern wing, it's a huge difference. So not only does the indicator fit perfectly, the door gap looks factory as well. I think well worth the extra money, shame about the mistake with the first one. Just for those interested, the pattern wing was about £110 and the second-hand genuine wing was £350. With the fender on, I can now add all of the rubbers and trims back on along with the front bumper. I can now also add the main side chrome trim to the new panel. It's a good job that I bought more of these clips than I needed, because in the end I've used 16 on this front left panel situation alone. The next thing I need to do is drill a hole in this new panel for the headlight wiper. With that done, I can now hook up the jets to the reservoir and give them a test. The closer I got to finishing the car, the more I started to forget I was even making an episode for YouTube. There are just so many things to think about, and when you're under pressure to meet a deadline, the stress is palpable. So apologies for the lack of footage here. This went on for some time and my camera eventually died, but once everything was attached, it was just a matter of making sure everything worked as it should, like the windows, interior, exterior lights, and making sure it went through all of the gears as it should and generally drove as it should, which to me feels similar to conning a boat. Anyway, because I was so preoccupied with having the inside detailed and the car cleaned ready for the owner, I didn't get much footage of the finished result. I know that sounds mental, but I was just so stressed. There were so many things to think about, I just forgot about making the video. Thankfully, the owner has been kind enough to get some shots of the car back in its home 100 miles across the country. And yes, you'll be pleased to know the car did make the 100-mile journey from my workshop to his house without any issues. I was actually surprised at how well everything worked and how nicely the car drove. There were a few interior bulbs missing here and there and some things not quite perfect, but for the job I set out to do compared to the work I actually carried out, this car is now at least 10 times better than it was when it first came to me. To remind ourselves of just how bad this car was when it first arrived, here are some before and after shots to finish this 15 episode mini-series. Sorry for the lack of footage towards the end there. Dealing with a customer makes everything so much more difficult and stressful, but I can assure you the E30 won't be like this. I will have ample time to film everything in detail all the way till the end. But there we go, one massive mistake finally over. Big thanks to everyone for sticking with me through it and for all of the encouraging comments helping to keep me motivated. So now the plan is to get back up to 3 to 4 episodes a month. So after this episode I'm going to get back in the swing of things with a very cool antique I've been wanting to restore for a while now, and not long after that the E30 325i Sport series will start up again until it's finished, something I'm truly excited for, especially with all of the lessons I've learned from the Mercedes. I now just need to set up my new workshop so it's ready for customer car parts and antiques, and also for my own car projects. So once again, big thanks to everyone for sticking with me through this nightmare. I'm now going to go lay down for 2 days straight to get over this, and then I hope to see you shortly in the next one. Cheers.